Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, and thank you guys for joining us on this webinar. My name is Nathan Craver. I'm with NC DPI. As many of you know, I saw a lot of familiar names on the attendees list. So my job here at DPI is to work with data assessment, continuous improvement, and technology and infrastructure. And one of the things I've been working on with Jenny Korn from the Friday Institute, who will be presenting in just a minute, is making an online version of the digital learning progress rubric. And I'll let her talk more about the rubric itself, and then we'll jump into some technical details towards the later half of the webinar. But just a couple of housekeeping items. If you guys have any questions during the webinar today, go ahead and put those in the question tab on your control panel, and we'll answer those as we go through at natural stopping points. And if you have any comments or things like that, just use that question tab as well. For whatever reason, in this particular method of the webinar, the chat feature seems to only be a one-way communication. So any questions or comments, put those in the question feature. We are recording today's webinar, so if for some reason you have to step out or something happens and you miss a minute or two of it, it will be recorded and will be posted on the DPI wiki page, as well as I'll send out an email to all of those who attended today with the link in it as well. With that, I'll turn it over to Jenny. And Jenny, if you want to get started talking through the rubric a little bit.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you guys can hear me okay. My name is Jenny Korn, and I'm the Director of Evaluation Programs at the Friday Institute. I co-lead the Digital Learning Initiative with Verna Lalbahari from the department, and have been, as you guys know, been working for a while on the Digital Learning Progress rubric. Have been through several iterations, and we're looking forward to this next round of getting feedback from the districts and getting input on that. Nathan he mentioned that there's a bit.ly on the very first slide that gives you access to the PowerPoint or to the slides if you want those or want to share those more broadly, but it's that bit.ly/DL Rubric Webinar. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and, just like Nathan said, I'll be talking through the background and the history of the rubric, and then kind of next steps, and then Nathan will do the more detailed technical pieces about how you actually enter your scores. So Nathan, if you would move the next slide. So as you all might have heard, Verna and I did a presentation to the board in March. And they asked and invited all districts and charter schools to complete the Digital Age Learning Progress rubric this spring. So, and based on feedback we'd been getting from the field, everybody really wanted there to be an online submission process. So Nathan, and I really wanted to give him kind of kudos for the work he's done leading that out of the department. He has created in that same sort of system that you all use and are really familiar with the DLMI. He has built out a platform that looks like an online tool that looks like the rubric. You'll go in and you'll check, and it'll input your scores online, which I know is a big improvement. Nathan, if you'll just keep going. Great. So one of the pieces of feedback we got when we first started talking about this was the technology directors that we were speaking with really wanted an opportunity to have input to help guide the processes for scoring and for sharing the rubric data. So much of this work is reflected in the day-to-day responsibilities of the technology directors. And so Nathan and I talked through this and thought that the best way to do this would be to set up a rubric data working committee. It'll be a short-term kind of commitment. We're not asking you guys, y'all, to commit for the long term, but as the data's coming in, and then as we think about how we're going to be sharing it out with our stakeholders, with everybody from your local school boards, with the superintendents, with the General Assembly and the State Board, that we want to think about what makes the most sense. What's a really good kind of accurate way to reflect what's going on with digital learning in our districts and our schools, and how to help prioritize resources. So what we're going to do is we're asking for nominations. We want to get at least one representative from each of our state board regions and 2 charter school representatives. We'd love to get those nominations in by April 20th. If you'll just email those to Nathan. And then we're also going to ask the boards from NC Ties, the North Carolina COSIN board, and then our school library media coordinator, or their association board, to recommend or to have somebody volunteer to help us with this. Like I said, we really want to get input into what makes the most sense and what would be most useful and helpful from the district perspective. All right, so as you guys know, and I think we've got this on a couple of subsequent slides, but you all should be pretty familiar with this. I know a lot of districts have been using it. During the development of the digital learning plan, we developed a digital learning progress rubric in 2015. All the school districts, 115 school districts and 120 charter schools filled it out. And when they did, we also gave them opportunities to give feedback. So we got about what made sense, were there any terms that were confusing, did the format and the structure make sense, was anything missing? And we took all that information and revised and updated the digital age learning progress rubric. So this is a version 2 from what was completed in 2015. It's got 25 key elements, as you can see, organized in these 5 main areas. But the structure, it hasn't, I mean, this update was done in February 2016. I think, Nathan, if you go to the next slide. Just a little bit of background on where the rubrics came from, what they were built off of, and then where we kind of really tried to leverage the expertise of practitioners here in the state to make sure that what we were developing really met the needs of our local context. And the intent of the rubric was really about providing a single framework, coming to consensus on a framework that schools and districts could use to design and reflect on their progress with digital learning. It also gave us a way to have a discussion about what were the strategies as a state and as a local school district that we thought were really critical to a successful digital learning initiative. And I think, as most of you know, in the rubric, one of the pieces of feedback and one of the things we wanted to make sure to elevate was this idea that it wasn't just the technology and the infrastructure and devices is just one piece. It is a foundational piece of the work, as you all know, but the rubric really articulates areas around content and instruction, data and assessment, kind of professional learning and leadership. So it's not just about the technology, but really tried to be a whole district approach about how to improve teaching and learning in the classroom. After we developed that district level rubric, again, that version 2.0 that we revised in 2016, another piece of feedback we got from the field was, specifically from the tech directors, was that this is an awesome tool for us to use for planning at the district level, but it really isn't a direct application in the schools. The things that a school leader needs to be thinking about and doing is slightly different than what a district leader needs to be thinking about and doing for digital learning. And so we worked, again, in partnership with many of you in the state to really try to identify and come up with a version that could be readily used by schools. The biggest difference between that one and the district level version is the emphasis on the infrastructure and the devices, since at least in our state, most of those decisions are really made at the district level. And so we really wanted for the schools to drill all the way down to what was going on in the classrooms. And then finally, when we started meeting with, and so that was released in September 2016. And then as we began to meet with our charter school partners, realized that they were kind of somewhere in between the district and the charter and our school version rubric. And so we worked with stakeholders from that community to develop and pilot and release a rubric specifically for our charter schools in March 2017. And this is just kind of an overview of the timeline, where in 2015 we had like we said, collected data as part of the digital learning plan. And now the revised rubric was released for districts, and schools released a little bit after that. So when thinking about how we use the 2015 rubric data, that data has been used since it was completed by districts to continue to reflect on and build on their own local transition to digital learning. We use it in both the department, DPI, and the Friday Institute use rubrics and the rubric data collected at this point annually by many of the districts, completed annually by many of the districts, for all the professional development provided that's funded under digital learning. We really try to use the rubric as kind of the foundational framework upon which all strategic planning and professional learning falls under as it relates to digital learning. And then at the state level, we used it to coordinate and guide professional development offerings, really help us think about how to advocate for policy and funding, and think more broadly about where we should be prioritizing resources. And honestly, in the digital learning plan, we used it as kind of a snapshot. Where were we in May 2015 as we were making these recommendations to the state about what the state needed to be doing to support digital learning locally? We needed a way to look statewide at what was going on. And a piece that we continue to want to improve and want to make deeper connections with is how the digital learning progress rubric and the data collected through it feeds into our district and school strategic plans and to kind of 1 and 2 year action plans. So as you guys are thinking about completing the rubric, and I know many of you have done this in the past academic year, or maybe considering applying for either a Golden Leaf grant or a digital learning grant through the department, our recommendation around completing the rubric is that you really want to think about how and which pieces of the rubric align to your district or school's digital learning efforts and how those fit into your larger strategic plan. You want to get an opportunity. I think some of the best parts of filling out the rubric, and when I've sat down with schools and districts and done that, it's the richness of the conversations when the people in the room disagree about where they are in the transition to digital learning. And I just think those conversations from multiple perspectives really help with figuring out and coming to consensus about where your district is. And then thinking about who across your district, at different levels of schooling, different principals and different roles, different people at the district, how each of them brings a slightly different lens that's important to consider when trying to assess where you guys are with digital learning. We also encourage many of our districts and school partners to think about all the different data sources you guys have available that could help you in kind of thinking about evidence for where you are with digital learning. You all know, drilling all the way down to the school level, you have your annual digital learning and media inventory. Every other year, you've got your teacher working conditions survey data, both at the school and then how that aggregates up to the district. The school technology needs assessment is just one example of a teacher survey specific to digital learning. And I will say the Friday Institute, in partnership with DPI, is working on revising and updating all of the digital learning focused surveys. So teacher survey, student survey, classroom walkthrough tool, and realigning all and updating our existing surveys. Stena is one of them to align to kind of our current thinking around digital learning and the rubric. I know many of you have local observation and walkthrough tools that you use. So thinking about how that data can be collected systemically and fed into providing some evidence of where you are with digital learning as it specifically ties to the content and instruction piece for digital learning. Also, I'm always encourage schools and districts to think about how they can get access to qualitative data. So doing teacher and student interviews or focus group to get feedback from those really important groups that, again, bring a different sort of lens than maybe folks at the district office have about what's going on inside the classroom and what their needs are and what's working really, really well and what do they need help with. And then also just think about what records you have of different levels of activities that have gone on, whether that's professional development or what sort of after school programmings or robotics clubs, all that stuff that you guys are doing really should feed into your comprehensive digital learning plan or program. And as we've been working with schools and districts using their rubric data, one of the things that we've had a lot of success with is using the rubric. I know it's very comprehensive and 25 elements are a lot to think about all at one time. So one of the strategies we've been encouraging folks to do is to really think about just one piece of the puzzle, eating the elephant one bite at a time, focusing in on one or two key elements, or having subcommittees focus on one or two key elements. Another way to think about that is to think about sprints and marathons. What is a sprint goal within a key element that you could achieve this academic year? Something that would get you some traction, some early successes. And then what is a marathon goal? What is something you really need, your whole entire district is really gonna need to get a lot of buy-in for? It's gonna need to get a lot of people at the table to come up with a solution specific to your district. We encourage you guys to think about different measurement tools that are aligned to your needs so that you can begin to track your progress, and also thinking broadly about who needs to be brought into the process to help with buy-in, with the development, with pushing back, with collecting data, all those different pieces. This is adapted from a model. Many of you have seen the Friday Institute professional development team uses this, as does several of the folks at DPI, and helping us to think about how each piece of the rubric, each one of the main areas, really, you need all of them to have a successful digital learning initiative. If you're missing leadership, that you might have some early resistance or ongoing resistance if no one's kind of driving the vision. Without the technology and infrastructure, your teachers are going to be really frustrated that things aren't working like they're supposed to be working. Without the content and instruction, teachers will have a lot of anxiety about what they should be teaching to and teaching with inside their classroom and how it's aligned to standards. Without professional learning, that it could lead to a lot of confusion if expectations aren't clear, if teachers aren't be giving the supports that they need to implement with to be successful in their implementation. And then finally, without data and assessment, without the data you need, how do you know really where you're going? You might have a lot of false starts. You might begin down one path without having had data to make decisions about what your needs are and what the right first, second, and third next steps are. So, and this is kind of, so as you're thinking about the rubric, we've been talking through some of the pieces, and a lot of this will be informed by that working committee that'll be made up of your colleagues. But it's the same rubric you all are familiar with. If you guys have filled it out, like I said, in the past academic year, and you think it kind of accurately reflects where you are with digital learning, you guys can just submit those scores online. We're not asking that you redo the whole process if you've just completed it, in the past month, 3 months, 6 months. And so what you'll do is you'll go in, and Nathan's going to talk about the technical side of things and how you actually submit online. But from a scoring perspective, it's the same as last time, this part at the key element level. So for each of the 25 elements, you'll get a score, a 1, 2, 3, or 4 on each of the 25 key elements. And then this is where we're going to be getting more feedback from that working committee. In thinking about how we score the 5 main areas, in the past, we got a total score and divided it, so divided by 25, basically, to get your overall rubric score. But here, what we've decided to do is create an average for each of the main areas. So for leadership, here's an example where they gave themselves a 1 for shared vision. So they were early for shared vision. They were developing for personnel, or I'm sorry, advanced for personnel, developing for communication and collaboration. They gave themselves an early for, I guess that's sustainability, developing for policy, early for continuous improvement, and advanced for procurement. And so their average score of that gave them a 1.9. So in their overall leadership score would be developing. We have a proposed kind of categories right now in the range of scores, and this is something that will be vetted by the working committee. Because basically what we did is we took a 1 to 3 scale and divided by 4 to try to make it evenly distributed across the different categories. We've gotten some other we have some other brainstorm possibilities, but this is our proposed scoring for right now. But again, this will be voted on and will come to consensus with the group that the representatives from the field. So here is kind of a summary. If using that same kind of average for each of the 5 main areas, this district would have gotten a 1.9, which is developing. Tech and infrastructure, they would have gotten an advanced, a developing, advanced, and early. And so if you take the average, if you add those together and get your average of the 5 main areas is a 2.14, and so they would be in the developing range. Again, this is the currently proposed scoring system. So we have electronic versions, as you know, on the Digital Learning Initiative website, and here is the link to that. Like we figure most of you have it, but wanted to provide that again. You could get access to the most up-to-date versions, and then I think Nathan we're gonna shift over to Nathan, and he's gonna talk about how to submit the online rubric.
I sure will. And just to piggyback on Jenny's comments on the scoring system, one of the things that as you look through the different rubrics that Jenny mentioned, the 3 different kinds, the charter and the schools and the LEA versions all have a different number of key items. So not all of them have the 25 items. The school one, she mentioned taking the tech and infrastructure component out, so it has a little bit fewer items. So scoring it the same way that we did last time wouldn't necessarily allow for apples to apples comparison between sort of the 3 components. So that's why we're revisiting the way it was scored. But for filling it out online, the link to the page there for the system is just schools.nc.gov/DL Rubric. You'll notice that it's the same sort of system as the DLMI, and instead of after the /NC DLMI, it's just DL Rubric. It is stored in the same system as the DLMI. So this link is going to be one you want to bookmark on your browser. It should work with any browser. We haven't had any issues with any of the 3 main browsers that folks use these days. I guess 4 browsers that folks are using now. So if you do run into any problems, let us know, and we can adjust to see if there's something going on. But from our end, we haven't had any issues with adjustment to screen sizes or things like that. When we first launched the DLMI, we had some things going on with Explore, but we think we've got those corrected in an update with the rubric now. So shouldn't have any problems with that, but just in case you do, just let us know. But if you want to go ahead and click on that link, if you guys already have a DLMI account, then you now have a digital rubric account. Accounts for this system are going to be requested through the same DLMI site that you would be requesting a DLMI administrator account for. So whoever in your district or charter school is the LEA admin or the charter admin, you now have that same level of access in the rubric. And just as a point of clarification, we do see this as an issue sometimes, but when we're talking about this particular system, we're talking about, when we use the word admin, we're talking about a system administrator and not a school building principal. Sometimes folks aren't quite as familiar with the idea of what an admin means sort of on the back end of IT. So just to make sure everybody understands, when we mean an LEA administrator, that doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with a principal's degree or an administrator type degree. It's just somebody who's going to manage the system and put the data in. So if you need an account, if you are not someone who has not in the past logged in and done anything with the DLMI, this page here will get you the directions to get logged in. For this particular system, we're still using the NCID. We will be moving to NC Ed Cloud within the next year. hopefully before January of this year, so that we can, when we fill out the DLMI for the 19 school year, that we'll be doing that through the EdCloud application. And then I've got a link there for requesting accounts. Because we know that this is a little bit of a different process than the DLMI, I do expect there is a role in the system that is called inquiry only. So, LEA inquiry, school inquiry. If your superintendent or curriculum and instruction or finance director wants to have an account where they can log in and view the reports on the DLMI, or excuse me, on the rubric, you can give them an inquiry account, and that will allow them to go in and look and see what boxes are checked without being able to have edit access. So we recommend having one person or two folks in the district who have the ability to go in and put in data, and then having the other folks who might want to view that as an inquiry-based role. And I'm going to actually click out of the presentation. I've put some screenshots in there in the event that you all do not have an account, so you can look through the screenshots, but I'm going to just go ahead and take you through sort of a walkthrough of what the screens will look like when you log in. So you'll get logged in, and you'll notice that it has the Digital Learning and Media Inventory logo here, just saying you're logging into that system. But to know that you're on the rubric, this picture up here in the top left will say rubric. So because you can be in both systems, this one will just allow you to know that you're in the rubric system. So when we go ahead and click log in, you'll come into a screen here with some introduction, some links to different things, some suggestions on how to fill this out and things like that. My screen does look a little bit different based on your level of access. You'll have different buttons on your screen. If you are an LEA user, someone who's filling this out at the LEA level or view access at the LEA level, you should see LEA rubric as well as school rubric at the top. If you are a charter user, you should just see this charter rubric tab. And if you are a school level administrator, which I'm not sure that we have any of those on the line today, but any that are on the webinar, you would just see school rubric. And then everyone who has an administrator type of role or a rubric account role should see this tab that says reports, and then you will not see admin. That's just for me to be able to make some adjustments for questions and things like that. So for the getting started filling out the rubric, you can either click on the LEA rubric or start LEA. Either of those take you to the same spot. As an LEA user, you should not have a tab. I'm going to use Cleveland County since you guys are on the line, and know that I won't actually fill out your data, but I'm just going to show you guys what this looks like. When you log in, yours should default to Cleveland County or to your county. You'll notice that you do have the ability to drop back a year. So let's say you filled this out last year as part of the school, you do have the ability to go back a year and fill that out if you so chose. Some of the reports and things that are going to come over time will show year-to-year progress. So that's up to you, but for now, we're just really asking for the 17-18 year. This first page, what we're going to ask you to do is let us know who participated in this self-assessment. I've given you the formats up here, but if you'll just type in their name and sort of role, that will allow us to kind of look and see who participated and see what kinds of teams districts use to fill this out or charters use to fill this out. It has the same basic system as the DLMI with the navigation on the left-hand side, where you can see in this particular case, as it's brand new, all red for having started those sections. There is a little bit of difference, and I actually misspoke yesterday in the webinar, so I need to correct this. But unlike the DLMI, there will be no black sections. Black on the DLMI shows that we're partially complete. In this scenario, it's either red or green, no partial. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on this, and Cleveland County, just know that I will clear out your data in just a second, so don't worry about that. But let's say Cleveland County is looking at Leadership Shared 1. They're going to fill this out. You'll notice over here on the right, and I'm zoomed in a bit, but you have a percent complete. That just kind of shows you how much progress you've made towards filling out the rubric. And in the past, you guys know that if this is similar to the teacher working, or not teacher working conditions, but the teacher evaluation, where in order to be ranked as target, I have to have all 4 target boxes checked. So if I read through this first row and I realize I'm target here and say I'm advanced here, developing on row 3 and early on row 4, when I look at this, I don't have to check each of the boxes. If I'm target, I just check that box. It's automatically going to fill in the rest of the boxes below that. I'm going to hit Save Changes. You'll see that it went ahead and filled out all of my boxes there, and so on down the line. So it fills in all the ones to the left. If you come back after you review this and you think, well, you know what, we overrated ourselves in this particular row, and I really need to take off advanced and target, you do have to check all the boxes to uncheck them. So I'm going to do that. Now, the one thing I will warn Cleveland County with them on the line is I'm going to uncheck all these boxes, but it's going to stay green. So just know you didn't really finish that one. That was me messing with you. But when you look at that, the reason why it stays green is because you do have the option to say that you are not on the scale yet. So a district leadership team is being created for the purposes of planning and leading digital teaching and learning. If you guys don't even have plans to do this yet and haven't even talked about it, and you're not even to the point where it's being created, and you don't feel comfortable checking that box, it's okay not to have to. You can not check any. And when I hit Save Changes, you notice that it saves that with no boxes checked. You will get a default score of 1. The lowest score you can get on the rubric for the way this is programmed is a 1. So even if you don't have any checked, you still get a 1 in terms of the average, which is why that range for 1 to 1.75 or whatever it was that we proposed is why it starts at 1 and not 0. A couple other things to note on here when you're filling it out. If you run across some words or some language that you're not quite sure about, we do have on every single page in here a link to the glossary. So you can just click that open, find the word that you need to look for. That's there for you as well. As Jenny mentioned, we do encourage the use of data when you're filling this out. So, you know, when you're looking through this, you can click a link and hopefully this will work. This seems to be taking a slower time clicking through here today. So it appears that I might have an incorrect link on this page. So I'm going to need to fix that. It happened yesterday as well. So something I need to check on the back end of the system. But what this will do is it will take you to your actual profile in the DLMI and let you look at the data for that profile. And you can use that data as you're filling it out throughout the system here. But that's there for you as well. And then if you've got additional notes, say for example, you reference a walkthrough document or a Google form that you guys use to collect data, and you want to collect that for evidence, you can put that in here, you know, type in notes. If you had an opportunity where you were really, your group was fighting over one of the 2 bullets, make that comment in there as well. But that's there for you as well. To collect evidence and things like that. The things that are going in the notes page, just know the notes are there for you. I know Jenny mentioned the idea of what data will be shared and how it will be shared. My expectation is that the notes are going to be kept just for you guys as sort of a private thing for you all to have there. There may be some general things in terms of, 75 districts used teacher working condition survey or noted that or something like that, but nothing specific to your district or charter. You do have the reports tab on your screen. I'm going to actually click back into the presentation just to show this screen so that you can see it a little better. But on the reports tab, right now you have access to one report, and that one report is just a summary report of what boxes you checked. So if I checked, which boxes of early, which boxes of developing, and which box of advanced, just to give you a summary of what you're saying you're doing, you can print this out, sort of a 1-page summary. instead of having to try to transfer back and forth between the two documents. You can just print this whole document out for your record keeping or to have discussions or that type of thing as well. The last thing I'll show in terms of on this slideshow before jumping back into the actual rubric is in the rubric sign off. Once you've gone through and have 100% of those saved, whatever boxes you've checked, and you've saved all of the different sections, all of the different components there, the key areas. The last screen you'll see is the submittal page, and so we have an LEA administrator. That's the person who is entering in the data, and then we do ask for a date of rubric completion. It defaults to the day that you hit save. However, like Jenny mentioned earlier, say you were filling it out for one of the digital learning grants that you got for this school year, and you were wanting to use that data. If you have a date on when you filled that out or submitted it for the rubric or for the grant, just put that date. So you could put, we filled it out in January of 2018. So we would just know that it was 3 months old or 5 months old. But, if you filled it out at some point during this school year and you want to use that just to let us know that this was basically just a data input process for you, then that's great. And you can do that here as well. But just to kind of give you an idea of what's coming in the report. So what you will see at the LEA is when we click on this, eventually what you'll have access to is a screen that shows you, what each row was for your leadership, tech, and infrastructure, all the way down with that average score that Jenny mentioned. You'll also have the ability to go back if you chose to enter in the years previously and have a screen that basically compares the two. The summary by descriptor allows you to see what boxes that you've checked across the way. And then if you're a district user, one of the things that's available in here, but not as, we'd love for you to use this, but it's not part of the invitation in the sense that we're not asking you to have every school fill out their rubric, but some districts have already made that a process where their schools are filling out the school rubrics. So if your schools are doing that as part of their strategic planning, school improvement planning, as a district, you would have access to see what they entered. So if you choose to do that, you can go through and look at each of their scores, and it's going to give you this year to prior year, so you can look and see their progress over time. And then if you were to click on their name, it's going to take you to their descriptors, so you can see what boxes they checked. So those are the reports that are going to be forthcoming. They're turned off right now because we're still waiting for that sort of discussion around the proposed scoring plan. And if that is approved, then we'll turn these on with that scoring plan. But as we said, the collection date's June 30th, so we've got some time on the reports on the back end to sort of make that decision and have some conversations over the summer before we release this data in whatever form we release it to you, whether it's just back to the districts or however we share that out in the future. But that is sort of the basis of the tool, and that is the majority, or that is all of the slides that I have in terms of the presentation. But I will go back to just our information here. I know Jenny is still on with us, so if you guys have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask, we'll hang out for a couple more minutes and answer any questions that you guys might have. So please put those in the question feature, and we'll answer those. Sorry, Ginger, I know I was giving y'all a hard time, but I've got to always give Tim a hard time whenever I get the chance. So if anybody has any questions, we'll answer those as we go through. I'm really, really bad at wait time. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw those in. In the meantime, if you don't have any questions right now, what is the URL for downloading a copy of the rubric? Okay, so let me go back to that screen. So it's this long one. But Linda or Landra, if you want to just go to the bit.ly for today, and you can go through the slideshow and just copy and paste that or click the link. It should be a live link. So I would just recommend going to the bit.ly and heading over to that slide. I always just Google when I can't remember this link. I always just Google Friday Institute rubric, and it pops up on the first one. Next question is, can you clarify requirements and deadlines for submission? So I'm not sure, Jenny, the way that I would say that in terms of requirements, it's an invitation from the state board to fill this out, and we are asking folks to fill it out by June the 30th. Anything to add to that, Jenny?
Yep. No, that's exactly what I would say. June 30th is, I think, deadline. We were trying to give folks enough time, kind of align it with the DLMI submission, and give you enough lead time to, if you hadn't had a chance to fill it out this year, to be able to dig in a little bit with your colleagues in the district.
Yes, I know from supporting the region that I worked with here now before becoming a statewide consultant, but a lot of the folks in my region had leadership institutes in June where they would get together with their principals and district leaders. That was a thing that we have a lot of folks here in this region who did that as a part of that process. So you know, that few weeks between school and July 4th break is a good time to potentially work on this if you aren't doing a ton of summer school and summer camps. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so if you guys think of a question, whether it's technical or overall, feel free to email both of us or either one of us. We will answer those questions as best we can. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the DLI wiki or the DLMI wiki space as well, but I'll email it out to all of you as well. If you've got somebody who you think in your district needs to watch this webinar or attend a webinar, we are doing another one next Thursday, I believe, on the 12th at 3:30. So we know some folks were on spring break. So if you've got some folks who need to watch it or you think need to attend the live one, we are doing the webinar one more time, and we will post all three as well. So if nobody has any other questions, we really appreciate you guys joining us this afternoon, and let us know how we can help. If it's facilitating the discussion to filling out the rubric to just answering questions about technical support, we'll be happy to do it. So Jenny, any final words?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank y'all for your time today.
All right. Thank you very much, and have a good week.
Bye, y'all.